Hey everyone, I'm Tassenix and welcome back to another mod guide video. This time we're digging into Darth Nihilus. He is a support that is generally running under Darth Traya. He does have his own leadership, but it's somewhat fallen into use. But under Darth Traya, he functions as a support that brings cooldown increase to the entire enemy team, passive debuff application, and true to his form as the Lord of Hunger, as the fight progresses, and as he is being debuffed, he's going to accelerate his health pool and just become absolutely massive. So, you have a ticking time bomb because he's also one of the few characters with an annihilate effect, an instant defeat. So it's going to be fun talking about this guy. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let's talk about the TLDR for Darth Nihilus. Set types should be a mix of health and defense. I think ideally, if you could, it'd be best to go full defense sets. I'm usually a little more constrained on those and need those for tanks a bit more. But if you could, I think full defense would do well for you. Otherwise, a blend of health and defense, and if you're really hard up, you can go full health. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that at all. Arrow should be crit avoidance if you're Relic 7+, for the same reasons that I like a crit avoidance arrow for Traya. I think if you're below Relic 7, you might be giving up too much health or protection from a survivability primary instead of crit avoidance. Something to consider. Now, for circle, triangle, and cross, I do say here to go with health. And between Traya's leadership, Savage Oppresses Omicron, and Darth Talon's unique, there's a ton of health synergy in this team, so it's an obvious choice to go with health primaries for these. There are a couple other considerations. Consider that Padme Amidala plus Moff Gideon plus 3 Galactic Republic supports or healers were able to punch through really huge Traya teams in past Grand Arena seasons because the Courage mechanic is taking the very high health of that team and using it against them, allowing you to do enormous damage, very often being able to one-shot Savage, one-shot Traya, one-shot Nihilus. So one of the considerations for that meta was having him in protection primaries, because then it's cutting into the damage that that Courage is able to do. And considering that the nature of Darth Nihilus is to stack and ramp health over the course of the fight, you could make a sound argument that for the early turns of the battle, having protection is probably more survivability than health. You need some debuffs to hit you, and then your health starts running away, at which point the protection is still probably nice to have. I don't think there's a wrong way to go here. I think Gidme has fallen out of favor as a counter to this team. DTMG really wants Moff Gideon in there, so it's tough to give up. Nevertheless, if you wanted to protect yourself for that, that's how you do it. All right, turn order should be somewhere between 2nd and 4th, depending on how you're running the team, between 3v3 and 5 vs 5. The bottom line is that you want him to be after Darth Sion. Darth Sion will use his AoE that's going to clear any buffs on the enemy team, consume Foresight, consume Tenacity up, all that bad stuff, so that when you go to use Nihilus's first special, you're able to get the most value out of that AoE cooldown increase, whatnot. Stat priority, I should say, for secondaries, defense is a higher priority than just about anything else. You're going to get plenty of health and, bulk stats just out of the team mechanics. So from a mod point of view, I think defense is the right way. Potency, I didn't know if I wanted to rank it ahead of speed or just behind speed, but I put it just ahead because it's actually sneaky good. It's not a terrible stat, as we'll see. Most people think that from his first special you don't need a lot of potency, but his unique actually does give you some benefit for having some. So I don't know that I'd make a ton of effort on it, but as far as a secondary to get some disproportionate value out of, potency's there. Speed is important. I put an asterisk there because he doesn't need to be blazing quick, but I really wouldn't try to be under 250 speed. I think folks at the top of the game have him somewhere 270 to 280. You probably don't need to be all that fast, but more is better, and try not to be under 250. Aside from that, after speed, it's welcome to stack on more health and protection. All right, now before we dig into his kit, I do want to refresh us real quick here on the effects from Darth Traya's leadership and unique that might figure into our considerations for modding. So From her leadership, compassion is weakness. Sith allies have 40% crit avoidance and plus 40% potency. So that's good to know because, I'm saying some potency would be nice on Nihilus. Maybe if you can get him up to around 60, then you're kind of free, shoehorned into 100% potency. Nice position to be. Next clause. When a debuffed enemy takes damage, all Sith allies recover 10% health. Synergy there. From Treya's unique Lord of Betrayal. At the start of each Sith ally's turn, Treya dispels all debuffs on them and deals 5% of their max health, maximum 75%, for each debuff dispelled. So that's to the character that is being dispelled. So Treya's unique will dispel Sith allies and do damage to that ally equal to the number of debuffs. That's the idea there. And the next one, when allied Darth Nihilus or Darth Sion are critically hit or inflicted with a debuff, Treya gains 12% offense stacking for 2 turns. That doesn't figure into how you might mod Darth Sion or Nihilus, but it's good to know that there's that connection. So, putting the critical avoidance arrow on Nihilus, you're kind of setting up a no-win condition, right? It's ideally the enemy doesn't critically strike you. If they do critically strike you, they're ramping your Treya's offense. Not bad. All right. I think that we'll start with the unique Lord of Hunger. We'll cover his leadership here at the very end. All right, Lord of Hunger says, at the start of each of his turns, Nihilus inflicts damage over time for 2 turns on a random enemy that doesn't have any debuffs. If all enemies are debuffed, inflict damage over time on a random enemy. At the start of each enemy turn, Nihilus inflicts health down on them for 2 turns. When allied Darth Sion or Darth Treya are inflicted with a debuff, Nihilus gains 10% turn meter and 30% max health, stacking until the end of the encounter. All right, so whenever Sion or Treya get hit with a debuff, he's ramping 30% max health per each debuff applied. So when I tell you that this causes his health pool to just run away, right? This guy gets big fast. So whatever counter people are using against this team, you have to really look at that one. All right, next up, his basic, Ceaseless Craving. Deal special damage to target enemy and dispel all buffs on them. If any buffs were dispelled, reduce the cooldown of Drain Force by 1. That's the next special here. All right. Drain Force says, deal special damage to all enemies with a 50% chance, doubled against buffed enemies, to increase their cooldowns by 1, which can't be resisted. For each enemy whose cooldowns were increased, reduce the cooldown of Annihilate by 1. So remember, from the Lord of Hunger unique, we have 2 passive sources of debuff being given out by this. These debuffs can be resisted though, so there is some value to having potency. And then it helps give value here to Drain Force, right? That's something to think about. We have an AoE cooldown increase there. Now, this is his defining skill. I think it's the original permanent instant defeatability in the game, so that's why even to this day in my head, I call it an Annihilate effect, not an instant defeat. Anyway, Annihilate reads as instantly defeat target enemy. Nihilus gains max health equal to the target's max health. This, the defeated target cannot be revived, and this ability can't be evaded, and starts on cooldown. So you can't start off just doing this. Now, there are conditions through Darth Treya, sometimes through Datacrons, that can enable a bonus turn or a cooldown reset, sometimes both. And then he's able to kind of pop off with this very early in the fight. Yeah, this is the thing to be afraid of. All right, next ability is leadership, Strength of the Void. Sith allies gain 60% offense and 150% health steal. Sith allies lose all protection and gain that much max health. Sith allies are immune to healing effects that are not health steal and cannot score critical hits. So there's quite a trade-off here. This is a very old leadership ability. It's not often used, but there are occasionally niche uses for that leadership. Sometimes with Treya, sometimes with something even more bizarre, like a Nihilus lead with Lord Vader, who, it's easy to forget that he's also Sith. But take a look at your Sith, tagged pool of characters and think about it. There are rarely occasions where this leadership can shine, but aside from that, it has generally fallen into. Okay, now talking about team comps and turn order, I have discussed this in the Treya video. I will have a link in the description of this one to refer you back to discuss it. But yeah, these characters are shown not in terms of who's the leader, but who should be the fastest character in terms of modded speed on each one of these compositions. I think when you're running in 3 vs 3, the traditional Treya, Nihilus, Savage, pretty easy for me to say that I'd like Nihilus to be the fastest. I think personally right now my Treya is the fastest. I like him taking a bunch of turns, so it's, not a big deal. But I do like him decently quick. Here in this composition where I drop Savage, usually my Talon's the fastest at a bunch, followed by Nihilus, followed by Treya. And here, if I'm going for that value play where I'm taking Savage away from Treya and I want Talon somewhere else, let's say with Malgus, I might use Scion, in which case he would definitely be the fastest because I need him to sweep off those debuffs before Nihilus gets moving. But anyway, for further detail on these compositions, I'll refer you back to the main Treya video. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the mods themselves. I have pulled up a couple, but here's mine. I'll show another version of this here from Aesop in a moment, but this is what I did. As I told you in the TLDR, I really would prefer if these were all defense sets, but I'm kind of stressed on it. So not really doing that much for myself right now. I did go with full health set type, critical avoidance arrow, and then 3 protection primaries. Now, what do we look like here for stats? So I do have a decently fast set on here. It's really fast to be over 270 without any type of speed set involved. These are some fast mods, not common. I acknowledge that up front. But we can see here that my protection pool is really strong, right? Up over 100,000 here at Relic 8 with 74,000 health. So we know that from all of the passive effects, Treya's Omicron, Savage Omicron, Talon unique, lots and lots of health going to be handed out, to say nothing of his unique ramping him. So giving him this nice basis of protection feels like I've got the most coverage for the early game. That's why, even though the Gidme counter's more or less fallen out of favor, I still preserve this modding. The only thing I think I'd really change to this point would be to try to move over sets. Anyway, we have 79% potency, so a little higher than what I strictly need to be up over 100% under Treya's leadership. Still, I have decent reason to expect that my passive debuffs are going to go out and help set up the condition to get the maximum value out of Drained Force, right? And then down to armor, yeah. Even though these are all defense or health sets, I did manage to find some defense secondaries in there, pushed them up over 60% armor. Not a bad spot to be. For a non-tank character, particularly a support, getting up around 65, 66% is something that I might expect to be able to do in full defense sets. That's something I might look at. But yeah, we have the 35% critical avoidance here. Of course, that's 75 under Darth Treya's lead. Considerable. Now that you understand that, you're thinking, wow, yeah, him having this rapidly running away health pool, best thing we really could do to extend his survivability would be giving him defense. Right? Now, all that said, I wanted to show you Aesop Rocks. He went a different direction than what I'm talking about at all in terms of having a speed set on Nihilus. But check out the stats. He's kind of going about the same way with different sets. So, he decided that he doesn't want to rock the crit avoidance arrow, even though he has a high relic Nihilus. He went with full health, and he went with full health all the way around. 4 piece of speed, 2 piece of health, right? He's at 109,000 health, 68,000 protection, 262 speed. So it's a mediocre speed set, right? Like, I guess it's, with a bunch of plus 20s on it, some folks might be thinking, man, I wish I had a whole bunch of plus 20s I could call mediocre. But as far as a speed set goes, this isn't a screaming speed set, right? It's only plus 122. Still, it's appropriate for Nihilus. He doesn't need to be blazing fast. He's got some potency on there. And his armor, not having any particular emphasis on defense, is only about 56%. But his speed is comparable, and you can see that his health total and his protection total are pretty much opposite of mine. We're competitive in that sense. The big advantage on my mod set, I would say, is that I do have the crit avoidance arrow. But, you know, you might prefer health, and I don't think that's a terrible way to go. I just think it's more value out of the crit avoidance. I think it's giving something that he doesn't give himself. Like, this man is giving himself a ton of health. I'm not worried about his ability to stack health, you know? I think that's the right move. So now that you've seen this video, I hope you have a sense of how to build him. The guy makes great use of health, bit of potency, lots of defense, solid basis of speed, but you want him to be able to hand out those passive debuffs and then capitalize with Drain Force, accelerating you into using Annihilate. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like and hit subscribe on the channel to see more. We'll be back very soon with the next video on Savage Opress. But until next time, it's been real, it's been awesome, it's been real awesome. Take care.